ladies and gentlemen, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to the Art Across Borders Artist Talk. My name is Jumoke Sanwo, and I'm the curator of the Art Across Borders program. It's great to have this wonderful artists who have come from 5 regions of the African continent, as well as the Caribbean, to try to bring regional perspectives, regional artistic perspective to us here in Lagos. Without further ado, I would like to invite Edson Chagas, Nicène Kossentini, and Kudzanai Chiurai. And we have 2 of the artists in the audience as well. So I would like you to acknowledge the presence of Fatoumata Diabate and our darling Mario Masilao. So, welcome to Lagos, I would say. You've been in Lagos now for the last 7 days. Part of the program actually involves an exhibition, a 7-day residency, or what we call a mini residency, a deep dive into the imaginary, the artistic, the cultural elements of Lagos, and then this talk, which brings everything together. Art Across Borders as a platform has been around for the last 5 years. And the idea is that the project in itself, envisioned by Artex Lagos and sponsored by Afri-Exim Bank, is an opportunity for us to think beyond the imperial logic of borders and to think about fostering connection across the continent. We believe that one of the ways that we can channel this is through our artists. And that's why we have this wonderful artist in representing the 5 regions. We have Edson Chagas, who is representing Angola, Central Africa. We have Nicène Kossentini, who is representing Tunisia, North Africa. And we have Kudzanai Chiurai, who is Zimbabwe, representing Southern Africa. So we're going, and I think I'm just going to go straight to Edson, to your work on display. We spoke about the title of the work when we were preparing for this. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the work?
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me here. The title of the work is Tipo Passe, which is a word in Portuguese that normally you use to talk about, that reflects the kind of portraits you do for identification cards or passport. In this case, it's for passport picture. Yeah, and then this project actually came out because of a situation that happened in a collection, in a house of a collection of a friend. He had all of these objects of African masks and different kind of sculptures. But many people, they would go there, they would be quite afraid of it. And one day I put one of the masks, and one guy was there, became very shocked, and he was telling the guy, "You're gonna die, you're gonna die." And I was like, "Why now? Now? Tomorrow? When? I mean, I know I'm gonna die, but not, you know." So that reflection really creates an impact. And I start digging into it, and then the situation also to come up with the idea of a passport picture was also because I was renewing my passport during that time as well, and I went to a shop to take portraits for my passport. And in Luanda, in Angola, normally you need to, for a passport picture, you need to be neat, you need to, you know, a good shirt, you need to be, and I was with a normal shirt coming from work, and then the guy didn't have, because some shops you have actually the clothes to put it, to help you. The guy just brought me to a computer and say, choose one of those. So it was full of pictures with suits with no head. So you could choose, and through your picture you would make a collage and something, and that's how I would have a photography, a photo. And that also made me think about the idea of, identity, and made sense to photograph, to actually come up with the idea of doing this kind of portraits for this series, yeah.
But your work actually delves into global consumption and consumerism, as well as sort of like the post-war nature, in Luanda. So can you speak a little bit to that and how this particular series extends, your ongoing interrogation?
Yeah, I mean, I think if that situation would not happen, I would not probably done this project using the masks. But to respond to your question, I would say that there is these layers, because the masks that I'm using, they are from the market. So there is this situation of the market. Most of the clothes that I use are also from the market, and some of them are already clothes owned by the people that I photographed, because there is this culture also in Angola of buying these clothes second-hand, because sometimes you can find brands, in this second-hand. I don't know here in Nigeria, but in Luanda you can see in the market, piles of clothes that you can go and select.
In Nigeria, we actually call that okrika, or we say bend down select. It's just basically second-hand clothing from the West that ends up in the market, and there's actually a high demand for it, even for what we now call the vintage. And sometimes people get lucky and find designer wear, and so on from that pile. So why did you decide, for example, to combine mask, which has a lot of cultural as well as historical sort of meaning, with this second-hand clothing? What is the symbolism of this?
It's kind of occupying the space of, because when you think about, because the passport has this, it's kind of a little fragment of, supposedly of, not little, but the representation of where you come from. So for me to put these two together was, so because also for me a frame, it's a space. So to see these masks that supposedly sometimes is called traditional, or like sometimes being kind of without some ignorance, being seen only has some sort of like what happened, like the guy, afraid of it, and this kind of situations. So for me to put those two kind of objects together, occupying this space of representation, was very important. Yeah, so that's why for me, it also because when I did an exhibition in Luanda, it was interesting to see how people reacted to the situation, because they would see sometimes faces of other people they know. It was quite interesting as well in that sense. And then for me, it's also a process of learning about I'm not doing a documentary about each mask, but at the same time, of course, I'm also learning more about it, and I speak with some historical. I have friends who work in Angola also with the history of the culture of masks and these particular objects. So yeah, it's also a process of learning for me.
Yeah. And you have a very interesting story about the Sita in this particular work, so do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this one is the only one, because normally I don't speak about the people behind. So this one, actually, because I was working with the producer, and the person that I work with, she knew the chief of region of Musulo, which is an island. So, and she was there one weekend, and then she spoke about what she was doing. And then he became very interested, and she called me from saying, "Oh, he wants really to be part of the project, wants to be photographed." I said, "Okay." So basically, it's maybe the only clothes that is his coat, like the one, but the shirt and the tie is the one we second hand. And but yeah, it was interesting, and he was telling me how important it was for him to see that someone was doing this project. He also told me that they still do some some events and rituals, but they use the same mask, so they don't have anymore the crafts people to do it. So yeah, there was this. That's why I think was the reason why I selected this image.
So I go on to Nicène. You also have a cultural object in this exhibition, which is something that has been, I would say, under lock and key for the last 50 years. So do you want to speak a little bit about, the cultural, personal object that you included in this exhibition?
Good evening. Donc, je vais parler en français et Haley va traduire.
So Nicène is going to speak in French, and then our dear Hailey would do the translation.
You're welcome. Thank you. En préparant l'exposition avec Jumoke, mon image en fait de la série What the Water Gave Me, c'est une image spéciale où je devais superviser moi-même l'impression. Donc, c'est là où j'ai pensé à trouver un matériau d'impression léger et facile à transporter. Et j'ai pensé à l'imprimer sur un tissu. Et en faisant mes recherches, j'ai fini par choisir la soie comme matériau pour l'impression.
Yeah. So she was explaining that during the preparation of the exhibition with Jumoke Sanwo a few weeks ago, she was talking about the series that is called What the Water Gave Me, and she was trying to find a solution, a print, and something that would be light and easy to transport. While doing research, she also ended up using the silk.
Voilà, et c'est là où j'ai entamé une recherche sur ce tissu en Tunisie et aussi sur son histoire. Et j'ai fait la découverte du Sefseri. Alors, permettez-moi de le décrire. Donc, le Sefseri, c'est un grand voile traditionnel tunisien en soie, en blanc ou en crème, et qui est porté par les femmes dehors. Donc, il est ample, léger et enveloppe le corps.
Okay, thank you. So while doing the research regarding the silk, she ended up stumbling onto the story of the sefseri, which is a traditional veil that is usually white or cream, worn by women, and they can wear it outside. It is covering, it completely covers them, and it, yeah. And yes.
Voilà. Donc, le sefseri a été abandonné progressivement pendant la période coloniale, perçu par les colonisateurs, mais aussi une élite locale comme un objet, voilà, comme un symbole de conservatisme et de tradition, à effacer. Et c'est comme ça que, en fait, le sefseri a complètement disparu du paysage urbain après, voilà, avec l'indépendance.
She's explaining that while doing more research about sefseri, she realized that it was well, women stopped wearing it during the colonial period, because it was considered as conservative and traditional, and the colonial people wanted the society and the woman not to wear it. And that's the reason why it has disappeared throughout the years.
Donc aujourd'hui, si vous visitez la Tunisie, vous ne risquez pas de voir une femme qui porte le sefseri. Il a complètement disparu du paysage urbain.
It has completely disappeared from the urban landscape. No woman is actually wearing it anymore.
Donc le sefseri, voilà, le sefseri que j'ai trouvé, ma mère, elle l'a reçu le jour de son mariage par sa mère, ma grand-mère maternelle. Et elle m'a raconté qu'en fait, c'était une tradition d'offrir cet objet délicat et précieux le jour du mariage. Et donc, ma mère, elle a reçu cet objet et ne l'a jamais porté. Donc, il est resté soigneusement plié dans cette valise noire pendant plus que 50 ans.
So actually, the personal object that she brought, which you can see inside the booth, was coming in that suitcase, the black suitcase. It belonged to her mom, who actually received it from her own mom the day of her wedding. It's an object that's delicate, that is usually offered for an extremely big ceremony. And this one has never been worn, and it was kept kind of like a secret, if I understand correctly, for more than 50 years.
Donc, pour moi, c'était une découverte assez émouvante parce que c'est aussi cet objet caché, un peu, voilà, effacé de notre mémoire familiale, intime. C'est une question au cœur de mon travail et de ma pratique artistique, parce que je travaille essentiellement sur la question de la perte et l'oubli. Et dépliant en fait le sefseri, pour moi c'était comme déplier une mémoire enfouie, familiale, intime, mais aussi collective.
Okay. So the discovery was very emotional for her. It was like a hidden object that she found that was also kind of erasing an intimate memory and also a collective one. In her practice, usually she talks about loss and oubli, forgottenness. No, forgotten, oubli, not remembering something. Okay, and then. Unveiling
Loss.
Thank you. And unveiling this object and unfolding it was like she rediscovering it, and she was owning it again.
And thank you very much, Nicène, for taking us through that journey of discovery. But I also wanted to ask you, how does this relate to the decolonial sort of memory? Especially as it affects Tunisia? What objects or what memories are being wiped out by sort of like the colonial encounters, and how do people resist or react to this loss, especially of traditional and cultural memory?
Alors, moi je crois que l'une des conséquences de la colonisation, qui est assez invisible, c'est le fait d'effacer les petites histoires. Des petites histoires qui constituent notre grande histoire. Et souvent, c'est dans la lenteur et c'est invisible que nous ne prenons pas conscience immédiatement de cet effacement.
To reply to Jumoke's question, Nicène was saying that one of the consequences of colonization is the fact that the little stories, the intimate one, are actually getting lost and getting forgotten, and they become invisible.
Thank you very much. And Kudzanai, we go, to your speculative film, We Live in Silence. And I wanted us to go a little bit to how you conceived the idea for the film and also your influences as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. The film and the photographs kind of emerged from a very interesting time, or from a film festival I'd gone to in Berlin. It was I watched a film by Medhondo. It was called Soleo. And I was really struck by it. I think it kind of took me 2 or 3 years to figure out where to start if I wanted to respond to the film, and in what way will I do it. So I think the starting point was then trying to name the film and in which context the film will exist in. So We Live in Silence is actually really interesting because it was a way of, like, when your thoughts betray you, like the actions you then enact from your thoughts, in some cases can betray you. So as a response to that, you will live in silence. So that then became a theme that ran through the photograph and how to interpret the film. And what you then notice within the film is that, not in the film, within the series of photographs and the film, is that every central character is a black woman. And this was never reflected in the first film I saw, because it captured an important time, I guess, in African history, like 1976, and then kind of this, I think, non-discussion of the role of black women in that time. So that then kind of sparked my idea. It's like, well, the idea that they live in silence, in some sense. So that then became, for example, the use of religious iconography in the entire film. The central is a black woman. Christ, the Ascension, is a black woman in this case. So it then kind of looks at, well, what then is power? Power can be patrilinear. The succession of power can be patrilinear. And then also the succession of power can be matrilinear. And then these are very important questions to ask at this time, and they should be asked consistently. So this then becomes the thread in the entire film, with this ideas like we live in silence.
Thank you for that, Kudzanai. So we also spoke about the local in relation to the film.
Yeah.
The film was inspired, by Senegal, which is a francophone country. You are from Zimbabwe, an anglophone country.
Yeah.
And we also spoke about, this idea of language and a lot getting lost in translation. So how did you overcome that challenge, or how did you embrace that challenge in the course of developing the film?
Well, it's hard because the film was dubbed in English. So I understood it from that translation. Although the physical interactions between the characters might say otherwise because of the nuance of the French language, essentially, which I don't understand. So it was then from that point, how then do I translate the film in a way I think that speaks to me and then also speaks to another audience? I used music. In most of the film, there are two chapters of the film where there's essentially dialogue, but then the rest of the film is essentially carried by music. And this then becomes almost kind of like very universal, because with music, it's very emotive. There's a language kind of built to it. There's a rhythm built to it. So that then becomes fascinating, and I think within the film, because that rhythm, that music also then becomes universal and is a language within itself, but then it's also something people are very familiar with.
And I also loved the monologue with Miriam Makeba. We can't see all of that through this image, but if you've seen the film, how did you arrive at using that element? Because I think it was just an eloquent run. I mean, it ran through the film, and it was quite. She was eloquently talking about all this many different challenges, which I think applies to all countries in Africa. She was speaking at some point specifically to what was going on in South Africa.
Yeah.
But then again, when you listen to it properly, that could have been anywhere else on the continent. So what made you decide to use that sort of interview element, I think, as a commentary on the film?
Well, that's interesting, because when I first made the film, it was 27 minutes in 7 chapters. But then with time, over a period of 7 years, it has grown to 47 minutes. And it's significant because you start to consider the film as a living thing. So you add new material, and then you digest it, and then you find additional archives, then you digest the film. And at that same time, you're letting people experience the film over a period of 7 years. So it has grown as a 7-year-old child, in some sense. And I will continue to add different archives. And I think over that 7 years, it's been drawing archives from Guinea-Bissau, from Nigeria, from Zimbabwe, from South Africa, from Zambia. And these archives are also kind of important markers for the film, so people start to understand the relationship between the archive and the characters and the female lead characters. So it's then the kind of this contradiction. The history is told by a black male figure. The action or the narration of the film is also then done by a black woman. So it's this kind of these interesting contradictions that take place within the film.
And speaking of archives, so we move on to Lagos. You've been in Lagos, as I mentioned earlier on, for the last 7 days. We all had the privilege of going to CBAC, which is the center that holds, a lot of the remnants of Festac 77 in Lagos. And we were all amazed by what we found from their audiovisual section, which I think appealed to you, Kudzanai. Yes. So do you want to speak about what that experience has done for you in terms of the archival work that you're currently exploring or that you have been exploring through your work, and the need for spaces like that in artistic production?
Well, the institution is very interesting. It's an amazing space, an amazing institution, I think, to visit. I think one who's involved in the arts should visit the space at one point in their lives. But then it's also, for me, it was fascinating because I run an audiovisual library. It's called the Library of Things We Forgot to Remember. So this is really interesting because we live at a time where we experience the world at the very same time, globally. You can look at Paris, France, Germany, Sweden, the US, the Americas, simultaneously at the same time. But then you can never do that about history, though. You have to find yourself in an archive to do that. So this then was one of the things that kind of brought about the idea of a library of things we forgot to remember. So this library is like an audiovisual archive built on vinyls collected from 1960 to 1985. I think looking at a period where a lot of African nations gained independence, and not only that, but then also looking at the black diaspora. So this archive then explores, or I think it is engaged in a conversation about what independence was, or what independence is, what independence should be. How should we imagine our independence? But then this is also related to our parents. Not necessarily me. This is related to my grandparents, but not necessarily me. But then I live in this forecasted future that my parents and my grandparents fought for. So that's, yeah. So it then becomes these archives, audio archiving recordings of what they listened to, the theater productions they went to, the political trials they witnessed, the protests they attended, the Independence Day celebrations they were present at. So in some sense, it becomes like a memory of their lives, and I think it's a memory of other people's lives within the Black diaspora. And this is what essentially the library is about. So from posters, letters, communication between individuals, between organizations, I think, and we find librarians to engage the work from filmmakers, architects, writers, anyone with a particular interest in archives. We work with them as a librarian.
And for you, Edson, what has the Lagos experience been for you? How has it shifted, your mind artistically, as well as also in terms of collaboration as well? Because we saw a lot of collaborative spaces in Lagos, artists who themselves become cultural producers, who themselves actually open up spaces, for other artists and so on. How has that shifted, your thinking around the role of artists in an art ecosystem?
Yeah, I think what it really was thinking about was during the visit, and I think when we visit the studio of Bruce and the importance of the work he's doing, I was thinking because now recently we have a university in Angola, and I was thinking about this idea of why these environments like schools and these kind of institutions in Africa should be more connected, and so it was good to have a connection with the institution, with the studio, and I exchanged some contacts. So hopefully in the future we can make that bridge and that connection happen. Yeah.
You were also inspired by Bayo Moborio's Madhouse, which was the space that we went to in the University of Lagos. Do you want to speak a little bit about that as well?
No, I mean, the architecture, and of course the thing of the engagement with young generation also is very important. And the work as someone who was a photographer, and sometimes being a photographer seems a little bit and he making this happen for young generation as well, not just here in Lagos but also in Abuja. And yeah, it was very, very interesting, and it's in a very nice area near the lake. So yeah.
And Nicène, for you as well, how has the Lagos experience been? There's been many studio visits. I think you were very much enthralled, with Uthman Wahab's work, when we went for a studio visit. So do you want to speak a little bit about that experience and what that means for you, and how would that shift you artistically as well?
Pour moi, c'était très intense parce que chaque jour, on roule dans la ville et on a nos impressions, et Pelou qui nous racontait l'histoire de l'architecture et de la ville. Et après, on a comme des stations, les studios des artistes, où on découvre la scène artistique de Lagos et la création nigérienne. Donc, il me faut du temps pour digérer et vraiment... parce que c'était tellement dense.
She was saying that the experience was very intense. They were doing a lot of things. They were actually, it's true, the 7 days were very packed. They had everyday meetings, and they were traveling across Lagos, so they were driving around with Pelou, who's here, actually, our wonderful tour guide, but he doesn't listen, but okay.
Hi, Pelou.
And then every day there was also other stops that actually were bringing more things for her, more food in terms of discovering the Nigerian art scene, the Nigerian creativity. She was saying that she needs a little bit of time to digest and to process what she has seen and experienced.
Donc j'étais particulièrement, oui, intéressée par le travail de Haussmann parce que moi aussi je suis très intéressée par la spiritualité et comment la réinventer dans notre présent.
She was very touched and moved by the work of Uthman, you visited the studio. She's also very interested in spirituality, and she felt there was a lot of connection between his and her practices.
Alors aussi, particulièrement, comme a dit Edson, très très émue par la visite du studio Pabrousse. Nous, voilà, on s'est arrêté du bus un peu loin parce que la rue, elle était très étroite et on a marché. Donc déjà dans le bus, en arrivant dans ce quartier particulier, intense et magnifique, il y avait plein d'images, d'objets, voilà. Et après, on a marché. Et il y avait toutes ces images, voilà, rapides qu'on captait. Et soudainement, on s'est arrêté, on est entré et on a vu, en fait, tout ce que j'ai vu, je l'ai vu en création artistique. Et je trouve vraiment très intéressant que Pabrousse, l'artiste, son studio, il est ancré dans cet espace plein d'imaginaire et d'histoire.
One visit that really was the highlight of the tour of the week was again, like Edson said, the visit of Bruce Onoprakpeya, which we see here on screen. She mentions that actually Bruce Onoprakpeya's studio is in an area called Mushin, which is on mainland. The bus stop quite far actually from the studio, so they had to, because the road is not practical, they had to walk a little bit, and instantly she was moved and very particularly sensible and sensitive to what she saw, the intensity of the area, the people there, the image that she saw. And then once she entered the Bruce space, well, it is true that his house is a full house full of imagination and creativity, like Nicène says. There's creativity and art everywhere, and that is one of the most important things she saw this week.
So we then go on to a collective, I think, engagement, which we want to start with the notion of how do you create work within lived experiences as well as the imagination. I want to start with you, Kudzanai, because I know that your work emerges from the archive, which a lot of it has to be speculative sometimes, but then there's also the lived experience as well. So how do you manage to work between the two?
That's really interesting. But then the difficult part about it is that I reference archives in some sense. I sample the archives. In terms of the sound, I also sample when I'm building the soundtrack. The image is also I sample. So it's kind of like this cycle where when I'm engaged in research, all that research goes into the library, and then at some point I refer to it and resample it and put it back to the work. So it becomes this like circle. But I find it harder, like I can't come to Lagos and make a work about Lagos in some sense. In the same way, because I only have looked at it from the outside, never from the inside. And like language is very nuanced here. I could never say it or interpret it with the same rhythm of conviction and same poetry that people speak here. So I would miss a sense of the dialogue and sense of the history. I think someone who lives here. But then what I can do is then speculate. I can then go wildly to the left, to the right. I'm not even here, go to the cosmic. And that's then where I can exist, because I find that space really interesting, because I can speculate what a future could be. I could speculate what a past could have been. So that then becomes really interesting for me. It's like, I lived in South Africa. I looked at Zimbabwe from the outside. So when I moved back to Zim, I looked at South Africa from the outside, having lived there from the inside. So there's always these ins and out, being the center of it, being the margins of it, which I think is kind of really hard for artists, I think, to nail down and say, I speak with this voice representing this person. I don't think it's a way, for me, it's like, I don't think it has worked really well in some cases. But I avoid that. I prefer to speculate. Look at the archives and then speculate.
And Edson, how do you manage to kind of overcome that as well, You've also had the outsider, insider perspective a lot when you're dealing with Luanda, because you've also lived elsewhere. So how do you manage this tension between the lived experience as well as the imagination?
I think when it becomes kind of a really tension, it's when it strikes, and then I start developing a project. So most of the things that I do, I started where I'm living. So, for instance, like when I did the project Found Not Taken with the objects, I started when I was living in Great Britain. But then when I moved back to Luanda, even though being different cities, I continue because I saw some sort of similar situation happening. But the cities are completely different. But also living for a long time outside Angola, I also felt like even being in Luanda, in my hometown, and in Mayanga, where I'm from, and with my friends from since when I was a kid, I still have some of them, and I still had the feeling of diasporic, So it's kind of live in a parallel, is that sometimes you are in deep and sometimes you are an outsider, and so you have all this kind of, and that's how it becomes kind of part of my practice. Yeah. So I guess that my story, personal story, kind of it's embedded in the process of making the work. Yeah. I don't know if I responded, but...
Yeah, I think you did. And Nicène, I want to go on to you now, because the tension also exists between North as well as Sub-Saharan Africa. There's this huge divide. So again, how do you, for example, now that you're in Sub-Saharan Africa, in Lagos, and then if you look to, for example, your lived experiences in Tunisia and so on, are there connections? Are there similarities and so on? How do you think, for example, that will shift your thinking about Africa as a continent?
Alors, moi, je crois la Tunisie et Lagos, par exemple, que j'ai visité, sont à la fois très différents mais très similaires. Comme on a discuté, en fait, le premier jour, voilà, j'ai oublié son nom, mais en fait, c'est comme si on a les mêmes vibes, quelque chose, voilà, qui nous lie secrètement.
She's saying that between Tunisia and Lagos, although it is very different, it is also very similar. She's talking about the same vibes that connects both cities.
Et moi, je crois, par rapport à la question comment on peut peut-être trouver des connexions entre nous, c'est vrai qu'il y a une grande distance. Il y a le Sahara qui nous sépare, il y a les frontières qui ont été imposées entre nous, et que peut-être on peut commencer par se connecter virtuellement. C'est c'est facile et c'est gratuit.
To the question about finding connection, she says that there's a long distance also between two countries, North Africa and Sub-Saharan region, because of the Sahara Desert. She's talking that we could start connecting each other virtually, because it will be first free and faster.
And what about local knowledges for you? How do you work with local knowledge? I mean, for example, your work has centered local knowledge, you know, for most of the series that you worked on. So how do you go about that?
I'm not sure I understand could you please, yeah.
Yeah, so how does she center local knowledge in her practice?
Ok. Alors, moi, je travaille à Tunis. J'ai vécu très longtemps à Paris, là où j'ai étudié, mais j'étais obligée de retourner à Tunis pour créer parce que je ne peux être inspirée que par l'environnement où je suis née et avec lequel je suis connectée.
She says that she studied in Paris, but she had to go back to Tunisia, and especially the city Tunis, because she can only create when she's connected to her environment and the place where she grew up.
Donc, par rapport aux signes locaux et voilà, à tout ce qui appartient à ma culture, c'est vrai que je ne le fais pas consciemment. Moi, c'est quelque chose qui est en moi. Que je capte au quotidien et qui certainement se reflète dans mon travail. Mon travail, il est assez conceptuel, donc on ne peut pas voir, il n'y a pas la représentation de ces éléments, mais il y a quelque chose qui se connecte en fait à ce milieu.
And to the question, to the local sign, her work is, she doesn't do it with consciously. Yeah, she doesn't do it with consciousness. It is something that she does every day, and her work is very conceptual. So the representation of the local signs are not very direct.
Thank you very much. So we go on to the final question now, and this is to everyone, including Mario as well as Fatoumata. So maybe I actually start with Mario. So where do you think you are, Mario, as an artist?
Hi everyone, and thanks a lot for this opportunity to be here in Lagos. As an artist, at the moment I'm in Lagos. Well, it's an interesting question. It's complex and it's easy also. What makes complex, it has a lot to do with the generations. My generation, I believe that is this one. Back on time when we start art, we didn't know anything about the market. We didn't know anything about exhibition, most of us. And our expectation has nothing to do really with the market, you know. So it has a lot to do with how we can express what we see around us and what we can do as young artists or young people coming from the continent. And I believe that the idea of art is to contribute for, you know, better way of seeing the world. So saying that is to answer the question where I am as an artist. You know, so I started exhibiting my work, and the first time I exhibited my work, I was invited, and I was so surprised. I'll just be short. I was surprised because they asked me, "How much is your work?" And I was like, I say, it was in Europe actually. I say, 10 euros. And they take me to live in my hotel, and they came again the next day, stop make joggings. How much is your work? I say, 10 euros. And then they say, you see, we're not here jogging, so you need to make a good price. And I start to think, it's like, okay, so maybe this, I try to be smart. It's like, well, this price is not good. So I say 15. And then the next day they put like 200 euros and everything was sold out, you know. So anyway, I had to try to balance myself between doing something that I like and to make a life with it, helping people around me, helping my community. But at the same time, my main interest is to do what I like, is to do art, is to contribute in the world, is to make people think different, you know. So where I am at the moment as an artist, I am nowhere because there's still a lot of things to do.
Thank you, Mario. And Fatoumata, where do you think you are as an artist?
Bon, bonjour tout le monde. Je suis très contente déjà d'être ici. Et où est-ce que je me place en tant qu'artiste? Bon, je sais que je suis quelqu'un de très spécial et depuis ma naissance. Les créations, je ne sais pas, comme elle a dit Nicène, me guettent sans même que je me rende compte. Par exemple, mon travail est beaucoup sur la spiritualité ancestrale. Et c'est quelque chose qui est à l'intérieur de moi. Donc quand je fais mes créations, ça sort sans même que je fasse exprès. Donc voilà. Et ça s'impose à moi en fait le fait d'être artiste. Et je suis la seule dans ma famille.
So, first of all, she said she was very happy to be here with us. She says that in her family, she's very special, different. And when it comes to her work, she's also like Nicène, she's very connected to spirituality and ancestrality. And for her, the work and her creativity comes to her. She doesn't really decide about it, it just appears.
Et aussi, la chose la plus fascinante chez moi, c'est que je crée beaucoup dans la spontanéité, en fait.
And she adds that she also creates with a lot of spontaneously. Okay, thank you. You could also move this, you know. Sorry, but it's just not like a... Oh, bien. Ok.
C'est bon, tu as dit? Et donc, mon travail qui est exposé ici est beaucoup inspiré sur nos éducations traditionnelles qu'on reçoit en enfance, c'est-à-dire les contes africains, qui est comme voilà, une mode de transmission et de conseil. Et c'est notre éducation orale, en fait, comme aiment bien dire les Occidentaux sur l'Afrique.
And she added also that her work is very related to cautionary tale, African cautionary tale, which is part of the education and the oral transmission that is in the continent.
Thank you very much, Fatoumata. And Nicène, where do you think you are as an artist?
C'est une question difficile parce que à l'époque où nous vivons, c'est vrai que je me sens un peu perdue. On se pose toujours la question, je crois, nous tous les artistes, c'est que voilà, pourquoi je fais ce que je fais, à qui. Et aujourd'hui, on vit dans un monde un peu mouvementé, voilà, qui est presque en voie de destruction. Et moi, en ce moment, c'est vrai, c'est une grande remise en question.
So, as an artist, she obviously questioned herself, asking her, like, why does she does what she does? Right now, she just observed that the world that we live in is very tormented. There's a lot of tension. And so she feels like it's, I don't know how to say that in English. it's almost like disappearing or destroying itself.
Like auto-destruction.
Yeah, auto-destruction. Thank you.
Oh, super. Kudzanai, where do you think you are as an artist?
I don't know. It's an unpleasant question at the same time. Like it kind of pokes you, and then you become very uncomfortable about the answer. Then you're like, let me just say it as it is then. Well, it's interesting because you kind of sit at the crossroads where it's like, we create cultural commodities in some sense. Like we're here, the work is there, artists are here, people are selling. So we create cultural commodities that carry, in some sense, a soft power. We can negotiate with it at some level, at some point. But then it's like, there's a value to my labor, in some sense. And that value of my labor, I think, is accrued over several years. So then that kind of creates a crisis. Like, should this be the only mode by which I can be, in some sense? Then on the other side of it is like, well, how can I kind of decenter that in some way? So that's where the library comes up. It's a space, it's a public space for people to come sit down, listen to vinyls. It's a space where people have found their relative voices. It's a place where they've heard their grandfather speak for the first time at a political rally. It's a space that I think, in some sense, kind of liberates me from my own practice. So I stand in the middle of both. And at some point, like, I hate what I do, but then it's like, I need to hate what I do so I can fund the library. So it's just it's a weird situation to be in. So, yeah, so it's like, that's why I said it's like, the question kind of pokes at you in an unpleasant way. Then it's like, well, should I tell it as I think it or, you know. But yeah, it's like, I'm just in between these two places, which can be confusing, can be unpleasant, can be frustrating. And that's it.
Thank you, Kudzanai. And Edson, where do you think you are?
I don't know, part two. I mean, it's a question, but that is always like, I think, I think I feel sometimes I'm still like in the beginning. So, and I think there's always, sometimes you feel like you achieved something, you know, and you are there, and then the next day, now what's happened? No, you have to still going. So there is this constant situation of questioning, what you're doing, and sometimes it's not even about in which stage you are. Sometimes it's like, is this, you know, being interesting still, you know, for me to do. So also probably, and sometimes financially it can be good, sometimes cannot work as well. So I mean, I would say, probably what I know is that I'm still here, and I will to continue to still here, and to continue to have these questions like the one you just. There is no much to say really about it in my side.
Thank you very much, Edson. And I want to say a big thank you to Nicène, to Kudzanai, to Edson, to Mario, to Fatoumata for joining this conversation. And we're now going to open the floor to the audience to join in as well. So if you have any questions, just show by the raise of hands.
Me again. Part of the program is to have the 5 regions of Africa and the Caribbean. So I wanted to have, maybe more for you, Jumoke, to have your take on the importance also of bringing the Caribbean into the conversation of Pan-Africanism and into that program called Art Across Border.
Thank you very much, Hailey, for that question. The idea is that with this project, we view the Caribbean as a parallel site for artistic and cultural production. And therefore, it's important to bring the Caribbean into the conversation when we're thinking of dismantling the borders across the continent. So we see it almost like an extension, of what's going on the continent, but also as a site to which we can embrace, to which we have similar cultures in some ways, and to which we can also include in this conversation around thinking of interconnectedness, connections, and so on, of people of Black as well as African descent.
Can I have another one?
Yes.
This is more for Nicène. Being in Tunisia, your primary language is Arabic, and the primary culture also is Arabic. Would you consider yourself more close to MENA or closer to Africa?
D'accord. Donc je réponds en français, tu traduis pour... Non, non, c'est bon, j'ai compris. Mais tu dois... Voilà. Ouais, il fallait pas. C'est vrai que par rapport à la situation, à la géographie de la Tunisie, on est à la fois connecté à l'espace MENA, à l'Afrique, mais aussi à la Méditerranée. Donc on a cette triple connexion. Et c'est vrai, c'est très enrichissant. Donc, il y a ces 3 connexions qui se complètent, en fait. Quand je suis en Afrique, moi, la première fois que j'ai visité un pays africain, c'était en 2007. J'ai visité Bamako. Et là, maintenant, Lagos. Et je ne me sens pas étrangère. Comme j'ai dit tout à l'heure, il y a beaucoup de similarités. Et on a une histoire, en fait, qu'on partage ensemble. C'est aussi la même chose quand je visite des pays arabes. Il y a aussi des connexions invisibles que je ne peux pas expliquer. Ce n'est pas seulement la langue, mais aussi, je crois que c'est à travers cette histoire partagée. La Méditerranée aussi. En Tunisie, par exemple, on a plein de ruines romaines. On est un pays qui est connu par les ruines romaines et on est très connecté et on a beaucoup de points communs avec l'Italie, l'Espagne, Malte, etc. et ces pays voisins. Donc voilà, pour moi, ce sont ces 3 connexions qui se complètent en fait.
So Tunisia has a very particular position. It is at the crossroad between Mediterranean area, the MENA region, and Africa. Whenever she's in Africa, actually the first time she came to Africa, she visited Bamako in 27. And it's like now she's also in Lagos, and like she was saying earlier, she immediately sees the similarities between both countries. That's what she's not necessarily looking for, but she sees them. She also mentioned that this is the same when she goes to a MENA region, and they have not only the same language, but they also share the same history. And it will be also the same for the Mediterranean region because of the because how close Tunisia is to Italy, Spain, also Greece. And in Tunisia, there's a lot of ruins, archaeological sites from the old Roman Empire that is bringing a whole history, a common history together.
I hope that answers your question, Hailey.
It's me again. I would like to ask a question to Kudzanai. My question is, I would like to understand how is important experimentation is in your working process, and how do you beginning creating your project? You're beginning with the image, you begin with the emotions, you begin. I would like to know more about that if you.
Or how I begin my work. Where do I begin?
Well, it's two questions at the same time.
Yeah, it is. They are two questions at the same time. But it's ideas. Like it's all very speculative. Like I can start from a position where the idea of sampling history, sampling the archive, or sampling the vinyls, but then that can escalate really quickly. Is that I can sample our conversations, and that can then lead to like different ideas, different challenging ideas. So that's why that film I spoke about has been in existence and changing for 7 years, because it's not a static film where it begins and ends. It's a film that lives. Every 2 or 3 years, editions are made, and those editions are challenging. From an audience perspective, those editions are also challenging from my perspective. So it's like an ongoing process, I think. And I think it's kind of ongoing, repeatedly. You wake up, you go to sleep. You wake up, you go to sleep. And someday you never wake up. But it's a process that's endless, in some sense. I think with all our work, like, we began somewhere, but then we're still making work. Whether it's a different source, a different reference, a different idea, a different dream, an ancestral direction, we're still making work, in some sense. Whether even the thought of thinking about your work is making the work, you know? So that's how I look at it. I hope that answered your question. Okay.
How I...
So actually, the question I have, it came while Kudzanai was talking. My question to you is related to your project, you know. So according to the conversation that we had here in Lagos, you are known by the masked man, you know. So anyway, the work, the body of work, the masked one, the Tipu Pasi, I think it's a very important reference, also identity, even if you don't want. When we talk about the mask in photography, we're talking about Edson. But my question is very related to the political situation in Angola and the change over the time. If it has influence on your work at some point. Sometimes we create work like it happened a lot with me. People, they say I'm political, and I say, no, I'm not political, you know, because artists, most of the time, they don't like definitions, you know. So, and sometimes you create a project that is very influenced by where you're coming from, but at the same time, you don't want to be involved in that situation, you know. So I don't know if...
I think the political situation impacted that was in my life, you know, the war and born there and then have to move to Portugal because in 1992 there was the election and after there was the war and then, so all this had an impact. But in terms of, in the particular, like the way I make work, no, I think if I wasn't in that time in 2010 when, or 11 when this, 12, sorry, that this happened, this encounter with this guy who was telling me I should not wear the mask and blah, blah, blah. I probably would not make this work. Like I said before, I was in London and Newport studying when I started the project of the objects the find objects that I find on the street. So a lot of the work is kind of I'm present in the spaces where I'm living. So London, Newport, and then Luanda. And then it's like Nicène said, like to do work. Like if I come here to Lagos to do work here, I would have to live here. You know, I would have to or to speak with. I mean, there is some kind of synergy that has to happen. You know, so the political side in your question is more an impact on my life as a person, but in my work, I think the political things are quite broad. It's quite not just Angola. It's quite the world, and it's not just particularly. And it's funny, like when even if it happens, like I have a project with bags also. So if that I buy these bags from the market in Luanda as well, in São Paulo market, and but then you see signs of the world in these bags. You see images that relate to China, to Great Britain, to Portugal, to countries that also have a relationship economically with the country. So yeah, it's quite elastic, the memory and the way things happen within my work, I think, and the process of making the work. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
You did, but you have. But it's okay.
So maybe I redirect the question to you, Mario. Is your work political?
Hello. I don't know if my work is political, but I'm coming from a situation where it has created a lot of influence in the way I think, the way I see, and the way I also do things. One of the things that have changed also and has added something on my working process, like what he said. So when I became an artist, I had the opportunity to travel. You know, so being here back after 15 years, 10 years, it recalls my memory for many things, you know. And then when I see things in the market here, when I see people talking, I'm so surprised, and we've been making fun of it. Oga, how far, you know. So, and then, but the way to react to that, it also has a lot to do from where I'm coming from. So all the struggles, all the political situation, it has contributed a lot to make me like what I am today. You know, I think like, most of us.
I think, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So then, even if I do a project here, like if I come to live here and I stay longer, I'm gonna do a project that has a lot to do with this specific space, but I'm coming from outside with different type of mentality, you know. Yeah.
Yes, it's true. Back into the work of the bags, we don't have image, but yeah, just to say that I was working in the newspaper. I worked in the financial newspaper in Angola, and when was the 2008? I think started, but then it was kind of continuing the world economic clash, United States, and then it started going Portugal, Greece, and you would see a lot on the news this situation. And in Angola, we were having a situation at the time that like, oh, we are okay. We go to Portugal, travel. Like it looked like we're gonna buy Portugal somehow. But then for me it was like, okay, but this, if it's happening there, at some point it will come. It will come to us too. So, and that happened. So that project kind of resonates. So the idea of dealing with politics, it can be quite, like I said, it can be from the place where you are, but also there is things happening outside your country that can influence also the situation of your country. So you have all this environment, all this world, Yeah, that's, I think now Now was a better answer, no?
Yeah.
So do we have any more questions? All right, so we call it a day. Thank you again. We want to say special thank you to our sponsor, Afri-Exim Bank, for supporting this project, 5th year running now. And if you haven't seen the exhibition, do check it out. It's called We Are Where We Think We Are. And I think from the conversation from the artists, you can tell that they are where they think they are. So thank you very much. And from me, Jumoke Sanwo, I'd like to say thank you and all the very best.